For years, the abandoned mansion at the edge of town had been a source of mystery and intrigue. Some said that it was cursed, while others claimed that it was haunted by the spirits of its former occupants. But when a group of friends decided to explore the mansion one Halloween night, they thought that it was all just superstition. They were brave and bold, and they didn't believe in ghosts or curses. As they made their way through the creaky old mansion, they started to feel a sense of unease. The air was heavy with a feeling of dread, and each room seemed darker and more foreboding than the last. And then they saw it. A figure standing at the end of the hallway, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. The friends froze in terror, unable to move as the figure slowly made its way towards them. But as it got closer, they realized that it wasn't a ghost or a monster at all. It was a man, dressed in a long black coat and a top hat. The man introduced himself as the owner of the mansion, and explained that he had been living in hiding there for years. He had been wrongly accused of a terrible crime, and had been forced to flee into hiding to avoid arrest. The friends listened in amazement as the man told his story. They couldn't believe that they had stumbled upon such a secret, hidden away from the world. But just as they were about to leave, the man turned to them with a warning. "You must never speak of what you have seen here tonight," he said. "If you do, the consequences will be dire." The friends nodded solemnly, promising to keep the man's secret. And as they made their way back to the safety of their own homes, they couldn't help but wonder what other secrets lay hidden in the darkness, waiting to be discovered. Maggie had always been afraid of the dark. As a child, she would cling to her nightlight, refusing to close her eyes until she was sure that everything was safe. But as she grew older, Maggie tried to overcome her fear. She knew that it was irrational and that she needed to face it head-on if she wanted to move past it. One night, Maggie was home alone, sitting in the living room watching TV. The power went out suddenly, leaving her in total darkness. Maggie's heart raced as she sat there, paralyzed with fear. She knew that she had to get up and find a flashlight, but the darkness was too overwhelming. Just then, she heard a strange noise coming from the hallway. It was a soft scratching sound, like something was trying to claw its way into the house. Maggie's fear turned to panic as she realized that she was not alone. She stumbled in the darkness, trying to find something to defend herself with. But as she groped around, her hand closed around something cold and metallic. She pulled it out, her heart racing in her chest, and flicked the switch. And that's when she saw it. The creature that had been lurking in the shadows wasn't a monster or a ghost. It was a cat, who had been scratching at the door, trying to get back inside. Maggie let out a deep sigh of relief and laughed at her own fear. She knew that she had been silly, but sometimes it's the smallest things that can set us off. From that day on, Maggie felt a renewed sense of bravery. She knew that she could handle anything, as long as she had the right perspective. Lucy had always been a curious child, so when she heard about a secret room in her house, she knew that she had to find it. She searched high and low, but no matter where she looked, she couldn't find any hidden doors or secret passages. But Lucy didn't give up. She was determined to find the room, no matter how long it took. One day, Lucy was playing in the attic when she noticed a small door that she had never seen before. It was tucked away in the corner, behind some boxes and old clothes. Lucy's heart raced as she approached the door. She could feel a sense of excitement building within her, and she knew that she was about to uncover something amazing. With trembling hands, Lucy pushed open the door and stepped inside. The room was dark, but she could see the outlines of a bed and a dresser. She couldn't believe her luck. She had finally found the secret room. But as Lucy's eyes adjusted to the darkness, She started to notice something strange about the room. The bed was unmade, and the dresser was covered in dust. It was like no one had been in the room for years. And then she saw it. The figure standing in the corner, its back to her. Lucy gasped in horror as she realized what she was looking at. It was a ghost, a specter haunting her house for years. And just as she thought that it was the end, the ghost turned around. Lucy couldn't believe what she saw. The ghost wasn't scary or malevolent. In fact, it was her great-great-grandmother, smiling at her with love and kindness. Lucy was filled with a sense of wonder and awe. She had always felt a connection to her ancestors, and now she knew that they were watching over her, even in death. From that day on, Lucy felt like she had a guardian angel, someone to guide her and protect her no matter where she went. Olivia had always been fascinated by abandoned buildings. There was something about the decay and the emptiness that drew her in, and she loved exploring the forgotten corners of the city. One day, Olivia came across an old abandoned hospital on the outskirts of town. It was a massive building, with broken windows and vines growing up the sides. She knew that she had to explore it. As she entered the hospital, Olivia felt a chill run down her spine. The air was stale and musty, and the silence was deafening. But she pushed on, eager to see what lay ahead. As she walked deeper into the hospital, Olivia heard a faint sound coming from down the hall. It was a strange scraping noise, like something being dragged across the floor. Olivia followed the sound, her heart pounding in her chest. She turned a corner and saw something that made her blood run cold. There, in front of her, was a figure hunched over, dragging a heavy object behind it. Olivia couldn't tell what it was, but it looked like a body wrapped in a sheet. She tried to back away quietly, but it was too late. The figure heard her and turned around. Olivia gasped in horror when she saw its face. It was twisted and contorted, with eyes that glowed in the darkness. Olivia tried to run, but the figure was too fast. It chased her down the hall, its breath hot on her neck. Just as she thought that it was the end, Olivia tripped and fell, hitting her head on the ground. When she came to, she was in a hospital bed. Her friends and family were gathered around her, looking relieved but also horrified. It was then that Olivia realized the shocking truth. The hospital she had been exploring wasn't abandoned at all, it was an active mental institution. The figure she had seen was a patient who had escaped and was dragging a mop bucket behind them, not a body wrapped in a sheet. Olivia felt a wave of relief wash over her, but also a sense of guilt. She had invaded the privacy of the hospital and had inadvertently caused panic and chaos. From that day on, Olivia vowed to respect the boundaries of others and to never again venture where she wasn't supposed to be. Maggie had always loved going on hikes. She loved the fresh air, the beautiful scenery, and the feeling of being one with nature. So when she heard about a secluded hiking trail deep in the woods, she knew she had to check it out. As she hiked deeper and deeper into the woods, Maggie felt a sense of peace wash over her. She breathed in the scent of pine trees and listened to the birds chirping in the distance. But as she walked, she began to realize that something wasn't quite right. The trail was getting narrower and more overgrown, and the trees were getting taller and more ominous. Maggie started to feel like she was being watched, like there was someone or something following her. Just as she was about to turn back, Maggie heard a voice. It was a woman's voice, soft and gentle. She sounded lost and scared, and Maggie knew that she had to help her. She followed the voice deeper into the woods, until she came to a clearing. There, in the center of the clearing, stood a woman. She was beautiful, with long flowing hair and piercing green eyes. She was wearing a long white dress, and she looked like something out of a fairy tale. Maggie approached the woman, wanting to help her. But as she got closer, Something about the woman seemed off. Her eyes were too bright, her smile too wide. Suddenly, Maggie realized a horrifying truth. The woman wasn't lost, she was a spirit, a ghost haunting the woods. And just as Maggie realized this, the woman's face twisted into a mask of pure evil. Her eyes turned black, and her smile became a sneer. Maggie tried to run, but it was too late. The ghostly woman grabbed her, dragging her into the woods. And as Maggie was pulled deeper and deeper into the darkness, she knew that she would never be able to escape. But then, just when all seemed lost, something amazing happened. The ghostly woman vanished, and Maggie found herself standing in the middle of a beautiful garden. The sun was shining, and the birds were singing. Maggie realized with relief that she had been rescued by the spirit of the forest, who had saved her from the evil ghost. Emma had always been afraid of the old abandoned house at the edge of town. It was rumored to be haunted, and no one ever dared to go near it. But one day, Emma's curiosity got the best of her, and she decided to investigate. As she approached the house, Emma felt a chill run down her spine. The windows were boarded up, and the roof was caving in. It looked like it had been lived in for years. Emma hesitated for a moment, but then she took a deep breath and pushed open the door. It creaked ominously on its hinges, and Emma felt a shiver go through her body. The interior of the house was even more eerie than the exterior. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling, and the air was thick with dust. Emma walked slowly through the rooms, trying to shake off the feeling of unease that was creeping over her. But then, she heard a sound. It was a faint scratching, coming from somewhere deep within the house. Emma froze, not sure what to do. But her curiosity got the best of her, and she followed the sound. It led her down a dark hallway, and finally to a door at the end. Emma pushed it open, and what she saw made her heart stop. There was a person lying on the floor, their body twisted and contorted. Emma couldn't tell if they were dead or alive. She tried to turn and run, but it was too late. The person on the floor suddenly sat up, their eyes glowing with a sinister light. It was then that Emma realized the horrifying truth. The person on the floor wasn't a victim, they were a monster. The abandoned house wasn't haunted, it was the monster's lair. Emma tried to run, but the monster was too fast. It cornered her, its eyes glowing brighter and brighter. Just when Emma thought that it was the end, she woke up, realizing that it was all just a nightmare. But then she saw something that made her blood run cold. There was a scratch on her arm, as if something had grabbed her in her sleep. Emma realized with a sinking feeling that the nightmare might not be over after all. It was a dark and stormy night, and Emily was driving home from a late shift at work. The rain was coming down in sheets, making it nearly impossible to see the road ahead. Emily was nervous, but she knew that she had to keep going. As she drove, Emily noticed something strange. A car was following her, tailing her closely. She tried to shake it off, but the car kept following her, no matter how fast or slow she drove. Finally, Emily couldn't take it anymore. She pulled over to the side of the road, hoping that the car would pass her by. But when she looked in her rearview mirror, she saw something that made her blood run cold. The car behind her was empty. There was no driver, no passengers, nothing. It was as if the car was driving itself. Panicked, Emily tried to start her car, but it wouldn't budge. She was trapped, alone on a dark and deserted road with the ghost car following her every move. Suddenly, Emily heard a voice behind her. It was a man's voice, deep and ominous. He told her that he had been in a car accident on this road years ago, and that he had been stuck here ever since. He wanted Emily to help him find his way out. Emily was terrified, but she also felt a pang of sympathy for the ghostly driver. She agreed to help him, not sure what else to do. As she followed his instructions, Emily started to feel like she was going in circles. She couldn't see anything through the rain, and she was lost and disoriented. Finally, the voice spoke again. This time, it told Emily to stop and get out of her car. She obeyed, stepping out into the pouring rain. And that's when she saw the truth. The ghostly driver was real, but he wasn't a man. He was a monster, a hideous creature with glowing red eyes and razor-sharp teeth. Emily realized too late that she had been lured into a trap. The ghostly driver wasn't looking for a way out, he was looking for his next victim. Emily tried to run, but it was too late. The creature caught up to her, and she knew that she would never escape. Laura was always afraid of the dark. As a child, she would hide under the covers, too scared to even look outside the window at night. As an adult, she had managed to conquer her fear, or so she thought. One night, Laura was alone in her apartment, watching TV. As the night wore on, she noticed that the lights were flickering. She tried to ignore it, but it was impossible. The flickering grew more and more frequent, until finally, the lights went out completely. Laura was plunged into darkness. She tried to find her phone to use as a flashlight, but she couldn't find it. She fumbled around in the dark, her heart pounding in her chest. Suddenly, Laura heard a faint noise. It was a scratching sound, like something was trying to get in through the window. Laura froze, too scared to move. The scratching grew louder, more insistent. Finally, Laura summoned up the courage to get out of bed and investigate. She walked over to the window and peered out into the darkness. But what she saw made her blood run cold. There was a figure standing outside, its eyes glowing in the darkness. Laura couldn't make out any features, but she knew that it wasn't human. It was something else entirely. Terrified, Laura backed away from the window, not sure what to do. Suddenly, she heard a loud crash, like something had broken through the window. Laura screamed and ran to the door, hoping to escape before the creature could get in. But when she opened the door, she was shocked to see her ex-boyfriend standing there. He had broken into her apartment, determined to win her back. Laura was furious, but also relieved. At least it wasn't a monster outside her window. Laura and her ex-boyfriend argued, and she finally managed to get him to leave. As she locked the door behind him, Laura felt a sense of relief wash over her. She was safe, and the nightmare was over. But as she turned around to head back to bed, she saw something that made her heart stop. The creature was still there, its eyes glowing in the darkness. And this time, it was inside her apartment. Rachel had always loved her family's cabin in the woods. It was a quiet and peaceful place, surrounded by nature, and it was the perfect escape from the chaos of everyday life. But this time, something felt off. As Rachel settled into bed, she heard strange noises outside. It sounded like someone was moving around the cabin. She tried to convince herself that it was just the wind, but the noises grew louder and more persistent. Finally, Rachel got out of bed and walked over to the window. Outside, she saw a shadowy figure moving around the cabin. She couldn't make out any features, but she knew that someone was out there. Panicked, Rachel ran to the door and locked it, hoping to keep the intruder out. She called the police, but they were too far away to arrive quickly. Rachel felt trapped and helpless. Suddenly, she heard a loud knock at the door. She froze, unsure of what to do. The knocking continued, growing louder and more insistent. Rachel mustered up the courage to look through the peephole, but all she saw was darkness. She unlocked the door and slowly opened it, ready to confront the intruder. But when she opened the door, she was shocked to see her long-lost sister standing there. Rachel couldn't believe it. Her sister had disappeared years ago. and everyone had assumed that she was dead. But now, here she was, standing on the doorstep of their family's cabin. Rachel was overjoyed to see her sister, but as they talked, she noticed something strange. Her sister seemed distant and aloof, almost as if she didn't recognize Rachel at all. Rachel tried to shake it off, but the feeling of unease lingered. As the night wore on, Rachel noticed more and more odd things about her sister. She didn't eat or drink anything, and she didn't seem to feel the cold, despite the chilly temperatures outside. Eventually, Rachel couldn't take it anymore. She confronted her sister, demanding to know what was going on. And that's when her sister revealed the truth. She wasn't really Rachel's sister. She was a shape-shifting creature, sent to lure Rachel out of the cabin and into the woods, where she would be devoured. The noises that Rachel heard outside were the sounds of the creature transforming, getting ready to attack. Rachel was horrified. She had almost fallen for the creature's trap. She knew that she had to act fast if she wanted to survive. With all of her might, Rachel fought against the creature, trying to push it out of the cabin. After a long and difficult struggle, Rachel finally succeeded in getting the creature out of the cabin. But as she looked out the window, she saw that there were more of them, lurking in the darkness. Rachel knew that she had to leave the cabin and run for her life. She grabbed her coat and fled into the woods, hoping to outrun the creatures that were chasing her. As she ran, Rachel realized that she might never make it out alive. But she also knew that she would never give up without a fight. It was a dark and stormy night. Mary had just moved into her new house in the countryside. Despite the howling wind and the rain tapping against the windows, Mary felt a sense of peace as she sat by the fireplace, sipping hot cocoa. As she sat there, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She looked around her room, but no one was there. Suddenly, she heard a creaking sound coming from upstairs. She tried to ignore it, but the sound grew louder and closer. With trembling hands, Mary slowly made her way up the stairs. The creaking sound grew louder with every step. Finally, she reached the top of the stairs and saw a door at the end of the hallway. It was slightly ajar, and a faint light was shining through the crack. Mary pushed the door open and gasped in horror at what she saw. There, standing in the middle of the room, was a ghostly figure. It was the ghost of a woman who had been murdered in the house years ago. The ghostly figure floated towards Mary, and as it did, Mary noticed something strange. The ghost was wearing a locket, and inside the locket was a picture of Mary herself. Terrified, Mary tried to run, but the ghostly figure blocked her path. Mary was trapped, face to face with the ghostly figure. The figure spoke, its voice cold and menacing. "You shouldn't have come here," it said. "This is my house, and now it's yours too." Suddenly, the ghostly figure vanished, leaving Mary alone in the room. She looked down at the locket on the floor and picked it up. As she examined it, she saw that it wasn't a locket at all. It was a tiny camera, and it had been recording her every move. Mary realized that a ghostly figure had been a ploy all along, created to scare her away from the house. But now, whoever had been watching her had all the footage they needed to blackmail her for the rest of her life. Shaken to her core, Mary knew she had made a fatal mistake by moving into the house. She had no choice but to leave, never to return again.